right before we get into this, if you have a question, if you have a topic that you want us to cover, or just anything at all, openpixelstudios.com/pod question. That will get you to the submission form. You can give. You're shaking your head at me.
It's just such a silly name. Pod question.
Ask your pod question. There's no other good way to say it.
That's fair.
Ask your questions. You can also visit our website for this podcast. Specifically, it's openpixelstudios.com/behindthepixel or /BTP. Either of those, you can listen to past episodes or, shoot us a note.
Yeah.
Give us a little ring.
A little post-it.
Little poke.
Hey there. Welcome back. My name is Catherine.
And I'm Will.
And this is Behind the Pixel, an Open Pixel podcast. The podcast where we try to close the knowledge gap between those who buy creative content and those who make it.
Yeah, today's topic: when you should decide to use animation, and when to avoid animation altogether.
Right. We know this sounds crazy coming from animators who are telling you that there's times where you don't need animation.
Animation is the way. This is the way. Been really into The Mandalorian lately. It's a really good show.
There you go. But yeah, so speaking about avoidance, I am a conflict avoider, as you know.
I am.
But what kinds of things have you been avoiding lately?
Ooh, my mom, probably.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We're just going to get... I was not expecting that. We're going to get real deep.
Well, she wants me to take this Pilates class, and I'm not feeling that. Pilates with my mom? Get out of here, Mom. Not doing it. I'm not doing it.
Well, it sounds like you might have some problems there. Maybe you want to work that out through therapy. But in terms of talking about our problem here today.
Yes, this is not therapy. Yeah. You're correct.
Why don't you talk about what the problem is?
It's a different form of therapy. One of the problems around deciding whether or not to use animation or using the medium is that there are different assumptions about what the medium could be used for. And as a marketer, you might be coming up with ideas before getting to the creative person. That's often a situation that we find ourselves in, which may mean that your initial idea may be a bad fit for your audience or may not be feasible from a creative standpoint. So, but, what do we know about fitting in? We don't fit in anywhere. Do you fit anywhere?
So I want to say the only places that I fit in are when I'm in my Honda Fit wearing my Fitbit.
Ooh,
yeah,
that's quite fitting.
Oh, boy. If you didn't know already, OpenPixel is a pun-based studio.
That is true. What's the problem on the creative side?
Right. Good question. So one of the problems is that the creatives might not be brought into the production process early enough. And so in turn, sometimes they feel stuck because they weren't able to provide a better fitting direction for the piece overall. And as a creative that's working on something, usually you kind of know this is sort of happening on the back end or internally, but you're not really able to speak up about it. Yeah,
there's been a lot of times when I'm in the creative chair and thinking, this is not gonna work, but the direction's already been laid out.
Right, and it's a tough place to be in.
Yeah.
But we'll get into it.
There are some definitions needed for this one. AR and VR. We get into that a little bit, just a tiny little bit. Just a little. We're going to dip our toes in there a little bit. And we should define what those are because they're very new technologies. And, I think some people have some different definitions of them and sometimes it's not clear. So AR stands for augmented reality. Augmented reality. It's when your world, when seen through a specific device, that is very crucial. It's important to understand that you need a device between you and the world.
So usually a phone or a tablet.
Google,
especially if you're
Google
outside
Glass,
somewhere.
Apple glasses at some point. So you look through these devices and then those animated elements are then put within the world in which you inhabit.
Through your device.
So you can see those things. So really good examples here. IKEA, you can use, I believe you could use the app in IKEA to figure out whether or not, the Malm desk will fit in your space. Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of other ones, but yeah. VR.
Right. VR stands for virtual reality, which you've probably heard of before. But it's really the idea that your entire world is simulated through animation. And so you're interacting with those animated elements and even people to create an immersive experience.
Yeah. The immersive part of it is really the differentiator. Mm-hmm. You're in augmented reality, the devices that you're using are being used as like an extension of your hand as we are today with mm-hmm. tablets and things like that. When you're, immersed in your experience, then all of your senses are kind of being taken over by the computer. So you're wearing some goggles, a headset, you have probably some headphones on.
Yeah.
You might have like a thing that you put on your nose where you can
you can smell. Ooh.
In the future, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That'll be a thing.
That's definitely coming.
Yeah. Smell a
VR.
Smelliver.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. So let's get into these roles. What role are you going with today?
Yeah. So I think today I am playing, again, the role of the creative.
You're a very creative person over there.
I am. Thank you.
I think that's 3 episodes in a row where I think. Is it 3? Maybe 2.
No, I think it was 2.
This might be the second.
Yeah, we'll have to switch it up next time.
We'll keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
Because you do a lot of the marketing for us.
Yeah. Are you also, what name are you assuming this time around?
Today? No, I'm still Mr. Comms.
Oh, okay.
I feel like Mr. Comms.
We can keep that going, yeah.
If I ever have like an avatar in the metaverse, mm-hmm. I think I'd name him Mr. Comms.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's a fair name.
Right? COMMS.
Yeah.
Mr. Comms.
So you're the marketer, I'm the creative.
Yeah.
So right, as always, we're presenting the problem through our lenses.
Eyes, yeah.
Yeah, and through the context of talking about it from animation.
Yes. So as a marketer, I look around the world probably using the internet. Right?
In theory, you're using the internet.
I'm probably using the internet. And I'm seeing animation basically everywhere I look. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing it in commercials, in advertising. I'm seeing it on my devices. I'm seeing it on my kids' devices. I'm seeing it on billboards, on ads, like everywhere. Right. And I'm thinking, I need to get in on this. Mm-hmm. Probably, right? Like it's not necessarily a new trend. Animation's been around for a long time, but I want a piece of that action.
You want to be a part of it.
So I say, okay, let's do X. I have an idea. I come up with an idea. It can be animated. Let's do X. It'll be animated. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah.
And in your head, that sounds great. You go off and you talk to your superiors about it. Maybe it's someone above you. Maybe it's your coworker. Maybe it's someone who like has some say in the decision, but you're getting some opinions.
Be a team decision.
I want to do this animated thing. What do you think? And they love it, right? You pitch your thing. Everyone's on board. You get sign off from the person. You get the budget, whatever it is.
That's amazing when that happens, right?
It is amazing.
Because
it feels really good.
Could you imagine that boardroom? Like everybody's cheering.
Yeah.
There's fireworks going off in the CEO's chair. Like they are so excited to use animation.
They're throwing puppies at your face, is what you're saying.
Oh, what a day that would be.
It's just a wall of puppies coming at you.
Absolutely.
So now you go out and you're in charge of this project. Now you got to go out and do something about it. You have to execute on the idea. So you bring the idea to someone else and usually a creative person, a creative firm, a creative agency, a production studio, whatever you want to call it. They look at it and they start to probably execute. They might workshop it with you, but some people might just say, look, this is what it is. Here's what we're trying to do.
Sounds good.
Please go.
Let's go do it.
Yeah. And so they start to execute and you think it's going to go amazing until you get the first look at that first pass of that first thing, and it's nothing like what you expected.
Oh. you hate to see it.
You hate to see it. So it's not even close to your fantasy, right? So now you have to kind of go back either to your board, the people who
all the people who approved it.
All the people who approved it are now taking back the puppies.
No.
And they're putting them away.
Where? Are they safe? That's devastating.
Yeah. And so now you either need to pivot really hard or figure out something else.
Right.
And that's a really tough situation to be in.
Definitely. Especially from a time and budget perspective, right?
Yeah. So what happens on the creative side?
Yeah. So simultaneously, let's say we're at that point where a marketer has assigned a project to me. I get assigned that project and the client for me already has a script done. Maybe they've even done some work on the visual side. They have storyboards or concepts already made and ready.
Sometimes done internally with their internal teams.
Yeah, absolutely. which sounds awesome. Going back to our, like, I'm kind of lazy sometimes, a little less work for me is never a bad thing.
A little less work for me, baby, is never a bad thing. I don't know.
Wow.
Breaking out the Elvis.
I see.
I went to the eye, so I'll tell you a personal story real quick. I went to the eye doctor just recently, and he had some blue suede shoes.
Oh, wow.
And I talked to him about it in person, and I was like, I like your shoes. And he like went off on a tangent about Elvis for like 20 minutes.
We're going to have to go watch that movie now. But right. So, so you talk to your client about Elvis, and you're having a great time. But then you start to realize as you're like combing through all the pieces that you got, that there's a disconnect happening between what the intention of the piece is. So I'm looking at it through two different lenses here. I'm looking at the stylistic choices that have been made through those concepts and storyboards, and I'm looking at the messaging choices that have been made through the script. And since the client has already made that, what happens is that I'm being asked to work on something now that for me has less clarity, because it's harder for me to depict what it is that they're really going for, because maybe the tone for the audience feels off based on the visuals they're trying to go for. I can tell already as a creative, and I kind of feel confident about this, that the video might negatively impact their brand in that way, and the strategy overall that they're trying to achieve. So a couple of things that happen here is that usually when I'm looking at a script, it's not necessarily taking motion into account, right? It might be solid around the goal that they're going for and what they're trying to say within there. But sometimes for me, I'm a little better equipped to understand where you can swap out a piece of dialogue for visuals, or vice versa. I was going to say voice versa. That's pretty good though, right? Voice versa.
That's a bad idea.
Yeah, we'll get there. So basically, it's being written in such a way that the visuals could have been stronger.
Yeah.
And so that means the messaging could have been stronger overall. So I, as a creative, kind of feel really frustrated by this, because I genuinely, truly want to help. I want to create the best piece of content that I can provide for you and for your brand. But you're putting me into this position where it's already a little bit too late, because it's out of my control in terms of what we're saying and what the messaging is. So I feel stuck, quite frankly.
Yeah. When everyone upstairs has already made the decision for you.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, okay, I just need to execute on this now.
Yeah.
And I feel like at that point, you really just want to sort of break free.
I want to break free. I want to break free.
You know, I was thinking about that Creed song.
What's that song?
I'm free. I'm careless.
There it is. Yeah. This is the singing episode, I think.
I think it is, yeah.
Let us know your favorite songs in the comments.
All right. Well, so let's provide some solutions to our friends here. And
try to both of these problems.
Yeah. So from the marketer's perspective as a solution, one big solution that you might want to consider is to bring in a creative into your process a little earlier in the process of your ideation phase. So when we talk about ideation phase, what we're trying to say is that there's a stage in our process, at least, that we kind of come up with ideas to figure out what's the best way to tell this story.
Right.
Or what's the best way to communicate.
Right.
And you want to do that even way before we get to it, because that's the part that matters to the people who are going to sign off on the project. And that ideation stage, bring in someone who's creative. It doesn't have to be an outside person. It could be someone in-house. It could be someone who's on the outhouse.
Oh, wow. I guess there's a reason why they never say, like, they always say out of house.
Out of house.
Yeah, that's how I always hear it.
Out of house.
Because outhouse isn't catching
outhouse
on anytime
soon. It's not great. It's not great.
Right.
Yeah. Well, but if you don't trust anyone outhouse, find someone in-house who might be able to provide some creative solutions to the problems, what you're trying to do, trying to figure it out. But you really don't want to wait until you find someone who will work with you to do the animation to then figure out that you have to pivot later. So what ends up happening is that you double your work.
Absolutely.
Right. You double the amount of effort because you've done one version of it, doesn't work out. Now you have to either go find someone else and do it again and again and again.
Yeah. So, which is such a struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so as a result, there's a bunch of stuff, but you end up losing time, you lose money, you lose effort on the project. You just have to double back. I mean, I think we've all been in that situation in some cases.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen clients come to us with a storyboard that they're not happy with and they want to start over from the beginning. Yeah. And we hate when that happens because we feel for them in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, we look at your storyboards and we're like, oh,
what happened?
This is not going to work.
And they know it's not going to work. And that's, you hate to go back to the drawing board after going so far into the process.
Yeah. So just a quick helpful thing here. Yeah. Let's get into ways in which when to use animation. So there's the idea of like, this is a problem and like, we don't have an ideation phase. Maybe we're not in that rhythm of doing that. Maybe we don't think that way. That's okay. Totally fine. Here are a couple tips to help you think about how and when to use animation. And we'll get into the places where you shouldn't. But so when to use it, working with topics with conceptual ideas that are conceptual in nature. So we mentioned this last episode, but AI, data, the cloud, things that are sort of security, conceptual. Yeah. So any of those types of topics, animation is a great place to put in something around that. Emotional journeys are a great place to put animation. So when you want to tell a story where the audience has to go through a struggle and find a solution and feel great about that solution in the end, that's an emotional arc that you want to tell.
Yeah, that you're really trying to visualize too in a broad scope.
Yeah, and that can happen across those three buckets: sell, educate, entertain. You can still educate through an emotional journey.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Passage of time or historical events. So sometimes you want to tell a story about maybe your nonprofit was built on this particular event happening, or maybe there's some history behind why you're doing what you're doing. That might be a place where animation can really sort of visualize what that thing would look like. It'd be really hard if you did like a live action reenactment of a particular time and period.
Yeah.
Really, really.
As much as I want to show in person my reenactment of my Dungeons and Dragons campaign, it feels like it's a better thing to have animated.
Yeah.
Like Vox Machina. Awesome.
Vox Machina. Awesome show. If you're into D&D, I mean, we don't have anything to do.
We do.
We don't have anything to do with that show, but that show is amazing.
Yes. Just
shout out to the folks that we do know at Titmouse doing some of that stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah. Another place to use animation when live action is just too expensive, right? It might be that you're trying to do a really expensive shoot. You have maybe a 3 or 4 camera shoot. You have like a bunch of people and like you need all these things. Sometimes that's just not in your budget. As a marketer, you know what your budget is for, hopefully for the year at one point, right? Ideally, or for the quarter and for the channel. So depending on how you're splitting that up, it really depends on your organization. But if your budget doesn't allow for live action, you might also be out of range for animation too. So depending, again,
depends on the complexity
where you are. Yeah. But keep your budget. In those cases, you want to keep your budget front and center so that people know what they're working with. If you're not open about that, it is so much harder to try to figure out what it is you want to do. Like if you just say, here's my budget, here's a number that I can get behind, take it to the person who's trying to do something. And if they talk through how they're going to use that money, that might be a better place to be. Alternatively, if you are doing a live action shoot, you can use animation to augment that piece of footage.
You can complement it.
You can complement it. We've done that for a couple different videos where we add animated elements to the world, and that makes it so much better.
Yeah, just to emphasize certain points or to clarify something that's complex. Yeah.
And my last point here is when your audience, another place to use animation is when your audience might actually want it or need it or be used to it. So when you're working with products or services that are geared towards younger audiences, so younger audiences by design, right? Are you watching animation at a much earlier age? They're getting into animation as part of their, normal world.
Yeah. I mean, we did growing up as kids.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, that's where most of it lives. But because they're used to seeing so much of that content, they're more susceptible or more open to receiving that kind of
receiving
kind of
the information through animation.
Yeah, but you want to make sure it's appropriate.
That's true, because I think there are situations where like you wouldn't really want to sell your next bottle of Grand Marnier with Bluey, right? It's not the best move, I think.
Not great.
But it's an interesting marketing question, right? Because who are you targeting with Bluey? Is it the parents or is it the kids?
A lot of the times I feel like Bluey is targeted to the parents.
Right, so they're engaged in watching.
Yeah, exactly.
So, but that's one of those
Can you imagine
areas
like a sophisticated Grand Marnier Bluey?
That would be quite interesting.
Yeah. Or Blue's Clues. Or
there you go. Yeah. So on the flip side of that, maybe we should talk about when not to use it, because this feels like an appropriate shift.
Absolutely.
So really when not to use animation is if there's no clear path on how the medium could actually be applied to your efforts. So honestly, in the marketing side, you want to kind of be real with yourself about like, if you don't fully understand the strategic benefit of the medium of animation, it might not be the right time to use it. And that's okay. This is really dependent on your specific situation, though. So again, this is why we reiterate the idea of like, bring someone on early.
Yeah.
You have to bring them on early to work through those creative ideas, workshop some things, understand what's appropriate and what's not, to help create that clearer path forward to the project. Because what tends to happen is that your audience might react negatively to the idea of like, if you're working on a product that you've never used animation before, and then you make this kind of sudden
shift.
Switch,
it's a big shift.
You make a big shift to
campaign,
animation. It could feel unprofessional. It could just negatively impact the brand. So one thing that we always recommend on that front is that if you're working on things where you're planning out like a video series, we always say start with one video first.
Yeah, just a small test.
Or, even like a small motion
market
test.
Or,
It's like workshopping that idea early to see whether or not the audience will react positively to it, whether or not the content is actually coming through in the right way, whether or not that information is being absorbed in the way that they were hoping for,
and whether or not the outcome that you want is what you're getting back.
For sure,
right? You want to measure the outcomes for your particular campaign or for your particular strategy, whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah,
just make sure you're measuring that test.
Yeah, because we've encountered where like marketing efforts or like even an animated video has failed in the past.
Yeah.
And so that's actually something that would be really interesting. Like if you're a marketer and you've used animated content before and it failed, we would love to hear from you.
Yes, absolutely.
That would be so cool to see like what happened as a result. Like, I
love learning from my failures.
Always.
And I also, what I love more is learning from your failures. Tell me how you
failed. Me personally, I can go all day.
Anyone. Yeah. No, anyone. I take so much away.
We want to hear from you.
Yeah.
But well, I've always heard the idea of fail forward.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Which makes sense.
Yeah. Fail forward, fail often, fail early.
Right. It's all connected.
Failure is the key to success.
In that light, there's clearly there's places where it can fail. There's places where it can succeed. And then there's this kind of like gray area about when and when not to use animation.
There's a little bit of a Grey's Anatomy here.
Wow.
Boom.
Oh, got the Grey's Anatomy joke in. Boy, I'll get you back for that one. I'll find some way to work in a scandal.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Nah, too good. Too much.
We're
too
big
much.
Shonda Rhimes fans here.
Go Shonda Rhimes. A few places where the animated medium might fall into this gray area is something I call a stereotypical character problem.
Talk to me about that.
Well, so here's the dilemma. We have a thing that we want to sell or educate on or entertain with. And we're trying to design a character, but deciding on any specific race or gender may make that situation questionable. You know what I mean?
I do.
And so the depiction might be inaccurate, and even further, it might be a little bit offensive.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the animation industry, we've seen that happen, and we do not want to go back. we don't want to go backwards into what animation has been.
Yeah, there's a ton of historical things that
over caricatures.
Yeah. So we want to be sensitive about that, but you want to be careful about what you're doing now, because you can keep doing that and not
right.
realize.
You do not want to go down in history as offensive in that way. Yeah.
So in these cases, you want to work with someone who is thinking through those character choices and really coming up with those choices with authenticity in mind. Right. So
not the buzzword version of authenticity, actual conscious authenticity.
That's true. So a good way to do this is try watching some examples either on their website or through some examples that you request or something like that.
Yeah.
And see how they depict characters and whether or not they're thinking about those things authentically. You can also, try to see what kinds of characters they've depicted in the past around your specific topic. Maybe if they have relatable videos or something like that, very specific, relevant examples. And
I think that's a situation where you can use your best judgment, because it's one of those things where, like, if it feels wrong, it probably is.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that you inherently, it happens in animation. When animation feels off, even if you don't know how to explain it or identify what the real problem is, you'll feel it. You'll know.
All right. Last sort of gray area topic.
Yeah.
And this is where we get into this AR, VR, hot debate, hot takes. We're here.
Is it the, or no, what am I thinking of? The Law and Order, like, we're going to have
I think you were right the first time, which is like Judge Judy or something.
Oh, is that Judge Judy?
I think so.
And then it's got the...
I think so.
Yeah.
I can't remember. Anyway, hot debate on AR and VR.
Yeah, we have different takes.
So we have different takes. And I think for me personally,
go ahead.
AR and VR both, maybe more VR than AR, but mostly fall into this gray area of whether or not it does what it's supposed to do. And here's why.
Go ahead.
Here are my takes. So what do we know? We know that technology oftentimes fails us. They're intended for good, right? You have this sort of intentionality behind the thing that you've designed. And oftentimes, it doesn't work out that way, right? It doesn't do the thing that it was intended to do.
I mean, just look at social media.
So when I think about AR augmenting my world, maybe through some glasses that I'll have in the future that I can touch and interact with and have it display a bunch of stuff to me, will that actually make my life easier? So I don't know.
Yeah, this is where the debate comes in for me, because it's so, for me, depends on the context of what you're using that tool for.
Okay.
Right? If I'm looking at an AR experience, I've seen this a lot in, like, the sports world, right? Where, like, you're at a game and then you're watching a touchdown happen and then, like, animation pops up and there's, like, fireworks and things.
You're talking about Nickelodeon. So Nickelodeon does...
Not just Nickelodeon, but
I say Game of Thrones stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of sort of ads that are AR related that through your television when you're watching the game, you'll see these augmented things in the space.
To, like, hype up the entertainment value, right? So clearly for entertainment purpose there, which might be engaging. Hard for me to say as somebody who doesn't watch sports.
Something I know about that is that Nickelodeon has increased viewership for the NFL on that particular age range.
Did it go for the intention they had? Yeah,
they did, and I think it is working. So, like, if you get a touchdown, you get slimed or something. Right. It's like all AR stuff. The intention of getting more viewers onto the platform or onto the shows or watching more sports seems okay.
Right.
Like, that's a pretty good...
But I guess if you looked back at it as me, I'd love to talk to a kid who got excited about it and then, like, is older now, and then like ask them if that was a valuable or meaningful experience that added to their experience. That's an interesting question.
Or does it just, like, did it get more viewership and that was the goal?
So for me, on the augmented reality side, I think it does have a lot of benefit, just, again, depending on the context. So if I'm looking at something like a more immersive experience within museums, right? Something that typically I find, especially for younger audiences, again, that if I take, if I go with kids to a museum, then I find that reading through the text the whole time is boring. Quite frankly, they have a harder time engaging in that way. So I've experienced this myself, where you go into a museum and you have your phone and you can look through the lens of a particular piece of text and then have somebody speak it out to you. It's an animated character that will like walk you through it. And that I have found has created a more engaging experience. So it just depends. I think that it has its place, but again, gray area, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
because how many museums are going to take that up to?
That's true. That's true, because it becomes more expensive. I didn't think about kids getting more educated through AR experiences. Right. That's an interesting.
Yeah, depends on the context. And I'm assuming this is the same case for VR, right?
So for VR, to me,
we got to talk about the concerts. I personally, I don't know. To me, it feels like if I'm putting on a headset and some headphones and I'm going to go to this particular VR concert, I might feel less connected, in fact, to the people who show up there, because it feels to me like I'm chatting, like there's a chat bot in the background that I now have to interact with on top of listening to the music. I came here for the concert, but now I need to interact. And I think to me that one, it takes me out of the music and into this like other realm of communication, which is, fine if that's what your deal is. And maybe you grew up with that. Right.
I think
that's where we differ. Yeah.
I didn't grow up with chatting while talking, while listening.
Right.
Like that's too many inputs for my brain to process.
Right. And meanwhile, for me, I get a lot of content through like Twitch streams and like, watching people play video games. So that concert side of like, I love the idea of being able, as a concert goer, I love the idea of being able to connect with friends from all over the place where we both have the same interest in the same music, but we can't all fly to each other to go get to this concert where tickets are usually really expensive.
But how is that different from watching a YouTube video of the artist all together with like a YouTube play thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think it's because you can actually interact with the people that you're with. I think it creates a unique, at least currently, right? Because it might get oversaturated in the future. But for now, it creates a unique experience that you get to do with your friends. You get to connect, you get to chat. Sometimes you get to interact directly with the artist. I think that's another thing too. The artist can say like, oh, Wall of Puppies, look at you doing your thing over there. That's cool. Like, that's fun. Like, it provides a closer level, a more intimate level of engagement.
Just tweet at him. Just tweet at the guy.
I'm not tweeting anymore. I think
we're done with Twitter.
But yeah, so the bottom line is that whether you choose to use AR and VR for your creative outlets, for your pieces of content, just being conscious about what you're using it for and why. If you're trying to do it from an educational perspective, you might need a bit more conversation that happens there to ask yourself, is this really engaging in a particular way? Because we've worked on projects before where we've done training simulations for different companies that are like talking about safety in the workplace. And so you have to
Which is very important.
Very important. And you have to recreate scenarios, but you don't want to do that with like somebody almost getting run over by something.
So for context a little bit, there's the training series that we did was around big, heavy machinery and big, giant warehouses and like people in those places that can actually get injured and like die. Like, so it is very important.
So it made sense to do for VR purposes.
Okay.
But so that's our debate.
Please let us know. Let us know in the that section below the video in the comments section. Let us know down there what your take is on AR or VR, or
how you would use it. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
How have you used it if you've used it already? So let's get into the solutions for creatives specifically. So we talked about this already, but essentially try to speak up more where you can. Please be sure to do that in a clear and intentional way for your client, because you do not want to anger them and say, hey, I want in on this. It's more like, just being conscious about how you're approaching it.
I think for us, it's just leaving that door open.
Right.
Look, if you want to talk to us before you even start anything, we're open to talking to that.
Absolutely.
And that there's some issue there too with some creatives being like, well, my ideas are gold.
That's an ego problem that I think a lot on both marketers and creatives. We all share that to some degree.
I don't want to share my ideas. They're gold. And then you're like, okay, well, are they? They're just ideas. Ideas are cheap. And I think that, at least for us.
Oh, interesting.
I consider ideas cheap because executing on those ideas is actually way harder. Right.
I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
But debate for later. So the question is like, basically, can you get involved in those creative choices earlier? And you can do that by kind of outlining the benefits to the client for doing so, right? We talked about how if a client is losing time and money because they have to repeat the process over and over, maybe that's a suggestion that will benefit them for the future. I kind of suggest that you might only do this with clients that you're a little more comfortable with. Because you're building relationships. If you can build that relationship, that kind of relationship early, and have it for the long term, that's a beautiful thing. But I start maybe with the clients that
you gotta build
would be
trust.
Open to that. Because you're trying to build the trust. A question you can ask is like, is there leeway to workshopping the script at the point where you have a script already? And sometimes the clients already have a schedule in place. You can ask that question. They might say no. But it's one of those things that it never hurts to ask.
It never hurts to ask.
But the way you ask it will matter there. And you can ask questions around the strategy to better understand what that true intention is, right? You going back to the idea of asking, are they using the medium of animation to sell, educate, entertain? Combo number 5, very important. So awesome. Let's cover a summary.
Let's recap. So big problems here for the marketer. Your strategy for the medium of animation is being developed without the creatives in mind at the right time, right? You're not involving a creative person early enough.
Right. And a creative might be stuck with that idea or that script or that storyboard that they cannot alter or change and can't provide their input on because they weren't involved early enough in the process, or there's not an opening there with which to do so.
So easy solutions here. Get a creative person early in on workshopping some of the ideas that you have for your strategies in the future. So it's kind of hard, but try to get someone, maybe you have someone in-house if you're working with a larger team, try to get some folks that are creative, maybe creative thinkers, not necessarily creative like doers, like not people who like create things, but people who just think creatively, and see what kinds of things you might want to come up with.
I want to acknowledge there too that it's not to say that you are not creative, right?
Oh, absolutely
it's
not.
more just getting a sense of like how it's really from the lens of motion, right? Understanding how motion is being applied to these things, it changes the nature of it. And then on the side of the creative, again, speaking clearly about what needs to change, how those changes might be beneficial strategically for the content that the marketer is trying to produce and for the audience that's trying to consume it, right? Because ultimately the end audience is the goal here.
All right, well, that's all we got. This is I think that's a short episode. I don't know.
Actually. I think the AR VR, like, we could have gone on for hours. I
know. Here's the tease. In the next episode, we'll start to explore the creative pipeline. And we'll tell you what that means with some animation terminology.
It's going to be fun. We're going to learn. We're going to get into
Let's get into words.
Words and
I think
stuff.
Words matter when you're talking about this stuff.
Which is, again, a weird thing for an animator to say. But like the words are probably the most important part.
Probably the most important part. I mean, the motion's important. But the words describe what happens.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a key.
We need words. Read your books, kids.
A big thank you to eMedia for producing this podcast. Our producer is Jackson Foote. Our music was created by Hidden and licensed through premiumbeat.com.
It's time. My favorite time of the day.
Every time I read it, I come to that line and I sigh hard.
Well, that's how our audience will know that the catchphrase is coming. When it starts with a sigh.
Until next time.
Stay honest.
Stay creative.
Stay open.
Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Thank you for spending your time with us. And we'll see you in the next episode.
And then, of course, stick around, audio listeners, for our next bad idea.
Check us out on Spotify if you want to hear our bad ideas.
Well, more than Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast.